Thank you for taking the time to register for the Play Language course in response to our Teachers Need Teachers digital magazine free course offer. Play Language is a teaching opportunity like no other. It's an experience that will lift you into a happier teaching future, an idea that allows you to unlock the institutional grip on you and your relationship with the students you teach. Play-centered communication is made to help you escape the confines of the academic classroom. Communication is key to the change you need and are looking for. A language that turns ordinary communication into a windfall of excitement and receptivity will be a welcome innovation for you and your students. Well-being in teaching is our priority. We know that your time is valuable. That's why we're making this easy and manageable. As your school year winds down, you can just start with Segment 1, Construction, and Segment 2, Communication. If your end of school schedule leaves room for creative activities, this would be a great time to try some paper hinge pop-ups or make and takes. Then, during the summer, you'll have time to visit the course at your leisure as you prepare to apply Play Language. By the time school starts, you'll be empowered by new ideas, knowledge, and anticipation. This will be just the beginning. Your Teachers Need Teachers group will continue to have one another for support as you explore and gain the knowledge you will need to dive into the pedagogic world of play. We hope you will be inspired by and follow in the footsteps of the teachers who helped create Play Language. As school gets underway in September, the plan is for you to use your puppets as much as you can in the classroom and record a daily audio journal to track your experience. In October, the group will gather in a show and tell Zoom, complete with antidotes and the presence of the puppets we use in our Play Language adventures. Between now and the Zoom in October, Jeff and I will be available to reply to texts, and we will check in with you from time to time. You will have the opportunity to stay connected with the other play pioneers in our group. For most of us, bringing play into teaching will cause some out of the comfort zone uncertainty. It's to be expected. What you discover outside the comfort zone is what this course is about. Listen to this conversation between Jeff Payton, Melissa Edwards, me, and our play-informed colleague based in Thailand, Nadia, for a little perspective on the subject of play-centered teaching. Thank you for being here. You are the first responders, the exceptions, the ones willing to explore and advance the cause of play in our learning culture. Immersing yourself in this course is a powerful act of kindness that you can show yourself and your students. Will it benefit you and your students significantly? You can count on it. Bodies, just like you guys both said, movement around the world. What if we change perspective? P for perspective with the puppets. That's when you can have a metaphor and actually put your vulnerability on your hand. You take off the mask that you're wearing and you put it on your hand. And this is why I feel so passionate about it, because something needs to change. And I don't know how things are going to change without a really vocal movement. So what are your thoughts on that? And what are the struggles that you have encountered being in schools and feeling that you're entering a very play-friendly school and perhaps not experiencing what you had expected?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, I guess, we're meeting to talk about play as learning, but I think even more foundationally than that is play as well-being, right? And so if we're thinking about countries or a school system that just isn't well, then we have to look at, well, what makes us healthy as humans? And that is play, right? How we've talked about the neural connections, but also the brain science around our nervous systems. And I know, Jeff, you talk about flow state, right? So we have to feel safe to learn, but also we have to feel safe to be well. And I think what play can do is soothe our nervous systems. It allows our amygdala to turn off, to not be the alarm system. And I think what tends to happen in places like the US, we double down on the wrong thing. We say, oh,
Yeah.
well, it's not working. So we double down on it. And it's like, well, if
Harder.
it's not working, you should probably go the other way, you know? So I really, I really connect to, as you said, Melissa, just in terms of what's happening in the States is that people are not okay. People are not well. And I think play, like we mentioned, is the answer because it is going to soothe our nervous systems. It's going to take a lot of vulnerability and it takes a lot of reflection. But when we're in spaces where we can't be ourselves, our nervous systems go wild. And then we are on edge and then we are grumpy. And then every little thing does cause us to be reactionary. So I fully believe, yeah, that play is the antidote to soothing the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. I've been reading a mantra every day in my mind. The opposite of anxiety is creativity. And
Mm-hmm.
creativity is play. It's coming into our wholeness. Even so many research scientists on happiness have all come to the conclusion that adults who take time to focus on hobbies, projects, sports, all of these things that are play. And the reason adults
Yeah.
are depressed and have so much anxiety is because they're lacking that. And our children who have the natural human right to play, they're not allowed. They get 15 minutes at recess every day, max. And then a lot of schools make them sit out if they're misbehaving.
Right. Well, and
It's
it's also in terms of like one of the struggles that I've encountered as well. Um, as you mentioned, like being in a school that says they're play-based and says all of these words, but then you go in as the adult and you're scared. Like I was in a school that paint got on the walls and I got verbally abused by my admin about it, because the building was more important than anything else. And how did paint get on the walls? And it's just like, and that instance was unsafe to me. And it's very different, obviously, than the conversation what's happening in the US. But for the nervous system, it's the same. I wasn't allowed to do something that was natural for 4-year-olds to paint. I wasn't allowed to let them do that. And then it became anytime they had paint on their uniforms, my co-teacher and I, we would like have panic attacks because it was like, oh no, but we didn't believe in that. We were like, they shouldn't have uniforms. They should be covered in paint, right? But yeah, so the way that the systems are also set up for the educators that we don't feel safe to allow certain things, it's like a ripple effect because we were so anxious, we couldn't function, and we were beautiful educators, but in this space, we were at our lowest.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of educators feel that.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to follow the rules.
Right.
And I mean that alone has eaten us away.
It's so
So,
hard when again, you can't look away, right? When you know that there's something that's going to remedy or that's going to be in the best interest of all the humans in the room, but you aren't allowed to do it, what do you do?
Yeah. So
I just want to, yeah, inject another side of this. Uh,
Hmm.
I think I think in the United States, we're getting close to a breaking point or a boiling point. There's a subterranean discontent with the schools. People know that they're broken, but they also know that we're just going to keep doing this until something happens. So part of part of the vision that Melissa and I are evolving is to um, put a vision of play into streaming, into into the social media and some podcasting. I have a repository of video of having captured teachers with their puppets, some of which are in their classrooms. The variety and the creativity is captivating. It's really unusual. So
Hmm.
I think it's possible to put on a show depicting what teaching looks like when you've got something else in your hand besides a handheld or a piece of chalk. And it's going to raise a lot of questions. There's a scientific aspect to it, whereby people who come into the courseware that has evolved over the course of a long time. But you come into the courseware, there's an opportunity, there's an opportunity at the end to participate in a little citizen science. Do some journaling, monitoring of what's happening to you and your class. If it's prohibited to do that, get some parents on your side and take a stand. Got to do something to depict learning that is playful, so that people can see actually what it's like, because there's no vision. There's no vision that exists for play that's happening beyond the third grade or the second grade. So this is what we hope to do.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the journaling aspect and the reflecting on what's happening inside, right? Because we know there's many teachers that are, okay, like play is good, play is right, but physically, it's a whole different process. We call it, in unschooling, we call it deschooling the body.
Say that again, please.
Deschooling the body.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So we can shed our thinking cognitively, but we also have to do it somatically. And that takes a lot of trial and error. It takes a lot of, when you start to leap forward, pausing before you do, and then pulling back and like you said, reflecting on, wait, why do I feel the need to interject right now? Why do I feel the need to kind of be power over right now? So I love that there's the journal and reflection aspect, because I do think there are a lot of educators who are like, okay, play. But it's a very yeah, but it's a very deep process. Even when I think for me, that's where the term play based comes in, because a lot of times we think we're doing play, but it's still a very controlled environment. And so that somatic aspect is huge.
Well, Melissa, corrected me the other day. I've been, I kind of go to the term play based,
right?
And for a while, but I've used play infused, but Melissa suggested play, is it?
Centered.
Play centered, play centric.
Yeah.
Which I kind of like, because, in theater, there's a school of thought that says you need to find your center. And that's that's a very good way to approach it. Even in movement, if you're going to pivot, if you're going to move, if you're going to think, if you're thinking, you are better able to articulate or direct.
I also feel the visual, like if it's play based, it starts at play and then it becomes less play. But if it's play centered, it circles around the play.
Yes. I think that's beautiful.
But you have a lot of experience with play and play therapy, Nadia. I'm just so interested in to hear, how did you get there, and what tips would you give us, or any.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I also love that you mentioned this idea of past third grade, because I think that there are people doing it and there are models. I think the language is just different, right? So I'm in the world of unschooling and self-directed education, which uses the language of consent a lot. There's a lot of like anti-school language in self-directed education, but what it essentially is play for everybody. And so after that incident I mentioned with the building and the paint, I left and because I quit that job after 2 months. I stayed for the year, but I put in my resignation 2 months into it because I knew this is not. And so there's a couple things I was thinking as you were talking, Melissa. and talking about the idea of play-centric, something I really learned and something I found can be an obstacle, but isn't, if we know, is just defining what you're talking about, right? So when we're having these conversations, when you're looking for a job, when you're just defining, okay, play-based, well, what does play-based mean to you? Because for some people, the term play-based does mean, consent-based play, but for most people, it doesn't. So my biggest tip, I think, is just always being clear about your definitions for things and asking, well, what is your, when you say play, what do you mean? Right? So that everybody can kind of get on the same page. So that's one of my biggest kind of learnings, I think, from that experience, going to a school that said, we want disruptors, we want it to be self-directed. They used all this language and I was like, oh, okay, yes, that's me. And then I got there and it was like, they just like cut you down right from the center.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so language has always been I learned, define it. It doesn't even matter what the word is as long as there's a common understanding of what it means. Sorry, my dogs are having fun back there. But yeah, so in terms of self-directed education, I mean, right now I facilitate a mixed age space. So it's 3 years old to 13 years old.
Wow.
And they're all together. There's not classes, there's not cohorts. They all have the opportunity to engage in the same things, obviously at different conceptual levels, at different cognitive levels, but they do it together. So, talking about media, I have so many beautiful images and videos of a 13-year-old and a 3-year-old in the sand tray together, in the sensory box, right? And I feel when play gets talked about for older kids, there's always this conception, oh, older kids still play, but it changes. And I always say, like, yes, but no, because they're still human, right? So the root of what we need as humans to feel safe, to be engaged with our senses, that doesn't change at any age. And so I've really been able to just see, well, what happens, because I'm an early childhood educator at heart, what happens if I set up this mixed age space with similar ideas that I would in early childhood space, right? So like I mentioned, the sensory box is there, the paints are here, the tools are, there's access to everything. And what you see is, again, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 13, engaging in the same things in surprisingly really similar ways. And so I think that I've gotten to kind of live out a dream of like exploring what does that look like. And I think that's why, within thank you. It's beautiful and you can't unsee it, right? It's just something that you can't unsee. The way that I'm able to relate to children in this space, like it's indescribable and you can't compare it. And we do. I still have friends who are teachers in schools, and I love, my favorite age right now is like 9, 10, and the tween ages. And to think about the way the conversations I have with them and the way I get to talk with them, and I hear my teacher friends talking about how they engage with their kids, I'm like, it's a whole different life.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a whole different world, and it's one that everybody should have access to.
Yeah. And you are truly privileged to have that,
Yeah,
to
for
have
sure.
that experience.
For sure. And I think that's why, I always say, but it's happening. It is happening in certain places. I think on top of, getting it out there, I think is also how do we create systems that allow people to have access to it? Because as you mentioned, it is a privilege. And also it's really hard to do things outside of a system, right? You do need the support of the whole. Something I like, I'm actually going back to schools after this year. So I'm closing my space in 2 months.
Oh, wow.
After 2 years, yeah, because it's not, when you're not being sustained by, capitalism still exists, right? So we've really lived a dream being out here. But we also, like, it's not sustainable, even though we're successful, right? We always have a wait list. We're always full. But it is hard to exist outside the system. So I really feel that there's so many beautiful models for what a multifaceted system could look like, but we shut down after a couple of years. And it's not just me, there's many in the States as well. There's many spaces that are radical and relating to children in trust-based ways and consent-based ways and in play-centric ways, but they always get shut down eventually because they can't sustain it.
Wow.
financially. Like I think the sustainability in terms of the well-being and the education that the people receive has a lot of longevity because it really impacts families really positively. But it's really that like systemic capitalistic connection that we end up having to go back to.
Right,
This
right.
is what I'm trying to bypass. I'm starting a nonprofit. Let me just tell you my idea,
Yeah.
our kids for it, and get any advice that you may have.
Mm.
My dream is to heal our public schools through creating like an intergenerational community project where I bring in retired educators, retired, maybe not even retired, but I was started this in St. Augustine, but I had to move, but bring in fired, men and women from the fire departments. I had a friend who was the branch manager of a bank. She said, "Oh, I would let my employees go like 2 hours a week." So just like people, humans,
Yeah.
our bodies, learning play language, learning how to have, like you said, consent-based play with our children and playing with them at lunchtime and recess time, because that's when truly a lot of the destruction happens, is during those transition periods, when there's a lot of bullying and you know a lot of problems. But if we could actually just bring in adults to play with the kids, perhaps that could soften some hearts towards play. That's kind of my first dream of my step towards making a sustainable wage. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, part of me would just love to start an unschool and do that, but I feel I just want to make a bigger impact as I can, if that makes sense. Where I think,
Yeah.
but what do you think?
Yeah, I love, you use the word multi-generational, and I think that's also the idea within unschooling as well, right? That's why there's mixed age. So I have a podcast episode where I keep saying from babies to old ladies. There's no reason why we're separate because we all learn from each other. So I think it's a beautiful vision. And I think, what the term that comes to mind, which is when I shared before, is just the idea of community based. So I think for me, and I think for many people, especially in different cultures and in diverse places in the US, community is important, and learning from diverse perspectives and people who are indigenous to certain places, and having the generational aspect in that idea as well. Because for me, when we say the word innovation, it's to me really going back. It's people think innovation like pushing forward, but I really feel it's going back to humanity, going back to the stewards of the land, going back to wisdom. And of course, learning from each other in that multi-generational setting because we are in a different world. But yeah, humans and being in community and real community, right? It's like there's all these sayings like, when are you ever outside of school in a room full of people who are all the same age? Never. Like that's not life. So I love that idea. And people who have diverse skills. And I think within unschooling, we try to do that similar thing as well, where it's like there's not teachers. It's like there's adults, and we all have different skills and knowledge and perspectives. And so I think it's a beautiful initiative anywhere to get kids because I think it's about reconnecting as well for any of these, bankers or firefighters. There is a transition of reconnecting to self. What can I remember what it was like to be a child? And I think that's also where we heal. I see it in my unschooling space all the time. Yes, there's 13-year-olds, but actually the piece of themselves they're healing is their 5-year-old self, right? And I think that that's the piece that's going to happen in what you're talking about with your vision is being around children, connecting to children in playful ways is going to heal their inner child. And for different people, there's different steps along the way, but it's really getting back to the root, which is somatic again, and in our bodies. Anyways, that was long, but yeah, I think it's a beautiful vision.
No, that was perfect.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Partly the strategy that I've been pushing for a number of years now, is to define play, at least in terms of getting people to think differently about it as a
Right.
language.
Mhm.
You know, we
Right.
look at play as a universal language. We look at, yeah, I mean, we look at play, we look at the art of puppetry. That's also a universal. And understanding that you can enter the realm of play as a language, I think, is a compelling and potentially sustainable idea in terms of the market, breaking into the market with
Yeah.
this idea. We're working in the marketplace of ideas, really.
Right.
And where do you think you're headed? Are you headed back to school, or
So yeah, I am actually I am going back to an international school. So again, there's privilege in that, right? Because international schools, although still they're not all the way there, I think they're a good like middle ground also for what things could look like. You know, again, saying that there's things that exist, I do think that international schools can be also a model for the spectrum, right, of what education can look like. Because I also think that dichotomies, especially in education, are out of control right now, right? So when I think of like breaking into the system, I think play is right. I think consent-based play is right. You know, like I think this is it. But also we have to hold space for all of the things to exist. Maybe conventional schools still do exist, and if those suit people for that point in time, okay. But how do we get like the range of options and access? So, anyways, I am going back to a school, but it is very play centered. It is, you know, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be going there. And to be fair, I've had about 65 interviews in the past 2 years with schools. Partially because I needed to get a job, partially because I'm like, I want to talk to everybody.
Oh, you want to find out what they're about.
Yeah, and I want to, you know, I was myself. I came with myself to every single interview, and out of 65, I've had 2 offers, which I think is really interesting because I'm very knowledgeable as an educator and very like you know, I can do the job, but people don't want to hear the hard thing. And so, anyways, that's kind of my personal journey. But I did find this really beautiful school in Bangkok. They're all women in leadership, which I really value. And again, this idea of communication, you know, I love it because every time they send me an email, emails can cause a lot of anxiety, but every time they email me, I'm like pleasantly like, whew. You know, they write in all caps and they say, we would love that. And, you know, that doesn't happen. And it's silly to think about. It's so small. But even the playfulness in an email from my administrators, you know, when I ask a question, you know, even just can you meet with me on a call? And the answer is absolutely. You know, and I'm just like, oh, okay. You know, even though I felt I was being pushy. Yeah, so it's I don't know. There is small ways I think like you're saying, Jeff, with language and communication, if we're able to be vulnerable with that, right? That is also healing. You know, just to get an absolutely or we would love that is healing for me.
Definitely.
well, I can relate to that, having found a comrade in arms like Melissa. You know, I hear you loud and clear.
Mm.
Um, is there a possibility that you could test drive my courseware and take a look at it?
For sure. Of
Um,
course.
and you know, I just want to plant a seed. I'll do it before Melissa does. Um, if you love talking to people, and I can tell that you do, about this, we're planning to talk to a lot of people, because I think if we promote a playful vision of a teacher playing in the playground of the mind of the classroom, it's going to drive a wedge into a lot of people's minds, a positive seed.
Right.
And I think the very exchange that we're having here is valuable. I think a lot of parents and a lot of teachers will be listening with their antennas up high.
Yeah.
So I think you're right about the international. Everybody in America looks at the international and they say, yeah, but we're
Yeah. How?
yeah. So I'd be honored to have you come in and look at the courseware and look at some of the teachers' journals, which are a
Yeah.
little bit dated at this point, but they're really not, because it's like you said, no matter what the age, play is play. It's interesting how many educators they really fear the leap.
Yes. And what I love about the paper talker, the hinge, is it gives educators a super immediate grasp on using play language with kids. It's so readily available, where I was scared of play. I had no idea. I was, I don't know, I'm not 7. But using the puppet, it changes everything. So
I think it really allows for the vulnerability, right? Like I love how you put it earlier, like taking the mask off and putting it onto your hand, because you don't have to be scared of what the response is going to be, because it's not you. It's away from you. And I think in therapeutic play, it has a very similar value, that whatever is really happening deep down, you're less scared when your puppet's on your hand.
It allows the power of vulnerability. And that's where learning happens, because we feel safe.
It's like a lightning rod.
A lightning rod.
It's amazing.
Well, thank you both. Is there anything else? I think we'll definitely be having more conversations.
Yeah, I'm just really happy to be connected with you. I think anytime, when you're in the play advocacy world, anytime you can talk and people understand, that's always nice. But also when there's this, I guess, drive to share it with others and to see, and I really love it in the healing aspect. I think since starting therapeutic play, I keep thinking, well, play therapy wouldn't be a thing if people could play.
Yeah.
It's like really what we're doing in the therapy room is what needs to be done in general in the classroom. And there'll always be a need for therapy, because there's always going to be circumstances, but really the healing that's happening is what we all need. And I love, Jeff, that through the specific with puppetry, you're giving an injury point, and that's really beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It won't be long before I send you a link to the courseware and charge. Maybe we can explore a little further once you've had a chance to look at it. And I'd love to know if you think that it's practical and whether you can use it.
Yeah, for sure. I would love that. I really appreciate it. And I think at the same time as we're all, in the same sphere, we're all still learning too, right? And as, there's always new things that pop up. And one of the things I love is just like connecting how language changes over time. So I'm sure so many things that will come up are like, oh, there's a word for that, in this space, in that space. So how do we connect the words that everybody are using that really mean the same thing? So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm personally very grateful, Melissa, for introducing me to Nadia.
I actually manifested this. Like, I'm not kidding. Like a year ago.
You're funny.
I'm adoring.
And also, again, like you mentioned vulnerability, Melissa. I mean, I think, thank you, because I think we didn't really, I don't know, we didn't have the best relationship maybe to say. And so even for you to be willing to talk with me and to reach out to us, I think is also healing for me, right? To come, I might cry now, but yeah, it's also really healing to make that connection.
Me too. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you for teaching me.
Lovely.
All right. So we'll be in touch, yeah?
Yes, we will.
Sure.
So, just
Thank you guys.
a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure. Absolute.
For sure.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.